Hayden Locke, President and CEO of Marimaca Copper. We are developing the Marimaca Oxide project and exploring in the northern region of Chile. I'm here today with our Managing Director and CFO, Managing Director of Chile and CFO Jose Antonio Merino, because we are here to talk about the environmental approval we've just received, which really means we are a seriously well-positioned new copper developer with a permit in hand, ready to turn our attention to construction. So exciting times.
It is very, very exciting times. And JA, I think you're known by with the folks, so I'm going to go with that too. Nice to meet you as well. And Hayden, before we sort of jump over there, obviously it's been a sort of monumental year. We're coming towards the end of the year. When you're looking back, I mean, how do you feel you've done?
Yeah, I think we've done really well as a team. I think we delivered, there are a few hiccups in terms of timing on our DFS. Obviously, we would like our drill results to be coming a little bit faster than they are, but I think we're happy with the progress we're making. We're happy with the plan we've got. We're very happy with how the team's performing, and we see a pretty clear path ahead for the next phase of development. So overarchingly, I think the scorecard says happy. Satisfied, no, but happy, yes.
Well, and obviously the raise recently, obviously, I think that endorses it tells you the market's backing you to do what you plan to do, and the copper market firming up. Would you say that 2026 should be the year to look forward to in copper?
Yeah, I think so. Look, there's always going to be volatility and there's always going to be risk to that price, in my view, because I think it's hard to predict what's going to happen. But I think overarchingly, and I've said this along for the 5 years that we've been speaking, I think overarchingly the next 5 to 10 years in copper is going to be very favourable, and we are coming to market with a new project at exactly the right time.
Well, I mean, it's like slight anecdote before we get into the weeds here. So I've arrived in Sydney this morning from Chile myself. Uber driver says, "Have you driven with me before?" I said, "I can't, no idea." He said, "You look very familiar." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh no, I know you. You are Mr. Crux." And I said, yeah, embarrassed. Yeah, yes. He said, "Is copper going to be good next year?" I said, "Yeah, I think so." He said, "Yeah, I watched you with Marimaca."
Stop it. Hopefully that's not a sign that it's the top of the market, Matt.
The Uber drivers are recommending me Marimaca. Okay, so we better bounce into it. JA, I mean, let's just start with this. It's a fairly sort of monumentous moment in the sense that these are the sorts of things that can hold companies up. But you've got your permit.
Yeah. Hi, Matthew. And hi, everybody. Yeah, it is obviously a great milestone. We have worked for years in reaching this point. Long before we made our submission around Christmas last year, we have been working in studying the ground, doing baseline studies, and also putting forward the strategy that leads us to these results. So I would say it's a long expected milestone that we just received today.
Right. Okay. Now, I think most people, when they talk about Chile, and South America more broadly, the type of permits people are used to hearing about is obviously EIA and DIA. So I think the Declaración de Impacto Ambiental, and the other one is a sort of Estudio de Impacto Ambiental. What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, there has been a point of discussion, and probably it's good to explain to everybody the main differences. How the system in Chile works is that you look to aim for a sort of a net or zero, close to zero environmental impact, from your project. So you have to do your assessment, your environmental assessment, and if your project produces what is called a significant environmental impact, you should go through an EIA, Estudio de Impacto Ambiental or Environmental Impact Study, in which you kind of assess what the environmental impact is, and then you assess what your mitigation and compensation measures are going to be. When your project doesn't produce what is called significant environmental impact, then you should apply through a DIA, Declaración de Impacto Ambiental. So it is not as much as our decision as a company, is a result of your environmental impact assessment. So what we did from the very beginning is to answer this question. Does our project generate what is called a significant environmental impact? And that answer has to be reviewed through multiple variables. So it's not just, it's a very technical question to answer. You have to review multiple considerations, flora and fauna, air quality, community impact, and so on and so forth. And so after you answer that question, does my project generate an environmental impact? You then decide, or you know what's your right pathway is. In our case, that was the pathway because we analyze, as we said, very thoroughly this project from all the variables from that may or not generate an environmental impact, and we came to that conclusion, and therefore we made a decision, or we submitted under a DIA. So as I said, it's not just our decision as a company; it's a result of environmental assessment that caused you to go to pick one way or the other.
But can you just give me a little bit more detail in terms of the specific technical or design elements of the Marimaca MOD project, which made you think this is definitely will qualify under a DIA framework? What exactly do you look for?
Well, you look for, as I was saying before, for many variables. In our case, there were 17 technical agencies reviewing our environmental submission, and each of those agencies would review that in their scope of work, would this project generate what is called a significant environmental impact, okay? So then this is literally everything. So for instance, we have certain potential water courses. So the DGA will say, okay, would this project affect these water courses in the event of a heavy rainfall? We have certain flora species on site, and then the flora agency would review, okay, would this project generate a significant environmental impact over these flora species? The same with fauna, the same with air quality, and so on and so forth. So we as a company obviously realized from the very beginning that we were in a favorable area. So from an environmental point of view, this is less challenging than other mining projects, and the location where other mining projects are. And therefore, but regardless of being in a favorable area, we decided to obviously review this in very much detail to confirm our view that this would not generate a significant environmental impact, and therefore this would be submitted under the Declaration de Impacto Ambiental. And I think this is probably where people got most surprised of, because typically a mining project they will have something in their area of influence that would be significantly impacted from an environmental point of view. So it's sort of the base expectation from anybody, a mining project would generate a significant environmental impact and therefore will be submitted under an EIA. In our case, I would say it's a combination of both. The base conditions of our project, the location, there are less sensitivities than what you typically expect from in other areas where mining projects are developed. But also our design of the project was considered whatever environmental sensitivities were there to make sure that our project didn't generate this significant environmental impact, as I was saying.
When you mentioned sort of 17 different agencies. I mean, potential for getting involved here. So, in terms of the overall sentiment and efficiency of Chile's permitting and regulatory environment today, can you describe that, and maybe how that reflects and how long it takes to actually get a permit over the line?
I would say two main things. Environmental assessment in Chile is very strict, and you have multiple agencies. In our case, we're 17, but it could be up to 23 agencies reviewing it, and each of these agencies, as I said, has a specific scope of work. For instance, you have the archaeology agencies, which is very strong, and they review that you do the baselines correctly and that there are no archaeological heritage there that you may be affecting. It's a whole lot of agencies, and it's a very strict. Just to give you a sense of an idea, our DIA was 4,800 pages long, and you have not to make sure that your environmental assessment was right, that your strategy was the right one. You have to make sure that the quality of your submission is the right one, that there are not inconsistencies across, the document and so on. So it is a very strict process, and each of these agencies would review this with a very, very fine lens. So here in Chile, our smart school are from 1 to 7. We say, okay, and you pass with 4. We say, well, here to major pass, you have to be 6.5 above. You cannot aim for a 4 or a 5 or a 6. So you have to make a very robust submission. Having said that, there is more consensus in the Chilean political and regulatory agencies about the importance of economic growth. This consensus is not wasn't here probably 4 or 5 years ago. There was more of an environmentalist sort of wave impacting these processes. Now the public in general realizes how important it is to support economic growth, and on that regard, how important it is to allow mining project to be developed, and therefore to allow for these permits to be granted. So it's a more positive sentiment, but it's still a very, very strict process to go through.
Right, so you're saying basically, because I think obviously we've talked over the past 2 or 3 years, things like in terms of constitutional change of leadership, etc. Do you feel it's a much better environment in terms of how the authorities view environmental projects like Marimaca?
Yes, it is. The consensus across the political authorities and the public in general is more supportive towards approving mining project, allowing because again, a few years ago, and when we were in the middle of these constitutional discussions, sort of the view that we should give preference, a much higher preference over the environment. To the environment over the mining development or project development was sort of a non-dilemma, because people realize that you can achieve both, protect the environment but also allow mining projects and projects in general to develop. So there is a better sentiment, but it still is a strict process, and also there are still certain bottlenecks in terms of the environmental approval and permitting approval that the system in general is trying to solve. But the sentiment has changed.
Tell me this, because obviously, a 4,000 plus page document is quite intense. But was there kind of setup before you even submitted that? Was there sort of setup for that in terms of community engagement? And obviously, I think there's a 3-letter acronym which perhaps isn't getting the love it once was, which is ESG. I mean, how do you set this up for success even before submitting the document?
Yeah, it is a good question, Matthew. I was first say that generally speaking, the company put forward. I know these 3 letters are kind of too used in some ways, but leaving that aside, the company puts the ESG standards very highly in their core values as to develop business. It's not just to say, okay, we're in a favorable environment, in a favorable locations, so this is going to be easy, and therefore we just focus on the mining and metallurgical aspect. That was not the case. All the environmental and ESG standards were put at a very high priority as part of the core values of the company, and that meant, again, doing multiple studies, reviewing how is the best way to permit this project, and also having in mind sustainable solution for water. That was a key issue. You have been in the northern part of Chile. Water is a very sensitive issue. So therefore, we reviewed very early on what our solution for water supply was going to be, and so on. So yeah, we as I said, there is a technical component in terms of the environmental approval per se, and the environmental document and the environmental evaluation. But you cannot ignore the fact that we are operating close by a community, and they are very relevant stakeholders in our project. So as opposed to trying to fly below the radars and not being known and I don't know, try to have that sort of approach, we decided early on to be very proactive. This is not mandatory. We were not obliged to go and speak with the communities, but obviously it's important for us to develop a good relationship with the community of Mejillones, and therefore we decided early on to be proactive with them, have a dialogue with an open mind, as opposed to say, okay, we're here to do this and that, and this is what the benefit that we are designed to you. We open a dialogue and we ask to them, look, what is your expectation as a community? What are your concerns as a community around this project? And we factor all that in, and then we develop a community engagement plan. I would say, even though it's not mandatory, it's not part of the technical evaluation of our environmental submission, but obviously the authorities understood that the company, Marimaca, was doing all these efforts and was having the right approach toward the community. And I would say that obviously this allow us to have a smooth environmental review. It's still very technical, and you can never go around the technical aspects. But when the authority sees, that the company is doing all these things, I would tend to think that they have a different mindset when reviewing and putting some and allow it to this project to smoothly move forward.
Okay, so early stakeholder engagement, technical preparation kind of influences the permitting outcome. But were there lessons learned going through this process that you can apply for, future permits? There will be need for other permits, obviously not as significant as this, but nevertheless, you need to go through a process there. So in terms of understanding a permitting roadmap going forward, what would you do differently? What would you do the same?
One lesson learned that we applied, and I think it's the right one, and not everybody do this, is the fact that we mapped the environmental sensitivities, and we designed our project around the environmental sensitivities, as opposed to the case of, okay, this is our project, this is where the ore deposit is, this is the topography, go engineering and design, the layout as you see it fit, and then afterwards you go and design and make the environmental evaluation and say, oh, I'm stepping over this flora species or this fauna species. We did that. That we put those restrictions. What I would do this probably differently. I would put more efforts into that, and so because that probably dictated the timelines for our environmental submission. We would have hoped to submit probably Q3 last year, and we ended up submitting in Q4. And it was the result of this project design, making sure that it was sustainable as sustainable as possible, having regards of the environmental sensitivities that were out there. I would think that was also an important strategic pillar that we followed.
Okay, well done. So I know it's taken a lot of work from a lot of people to get to this point. But you now got a piece of paper which says, right, you have a DIA, you've got a permit. What next? What are you going to be able to do? How quickly can you start?
Yeah. So how the system works, and when I was mentioning about bottlenecks, it's important to understand, the permitting environment in Chile is not just the RCA, but also the future what we call sectoral permits. And so there are a few ones that we need in order to be able to break ground. We think that we will be in a position to break ground by the end of Q1 next year, having regards of the submissions of these sectoral permits. So as we were saying before, we will unbottle we have unbottled the champagne celebrating this, but tomorrow we go back and heads down to continue with this sectorial permit application. So there are multiple other permits that we need to approve. They are less risky because the main one is once you have your RCA, which is the environmental assessment, so that makes sure that the project from an environmental point of view is allowed to be built. Then you have to go and more of an engineering level, if you want to call it that way. For instance, the water crossing. Okay, what is the technical solution to cross any water course to make sure that there is no flora, things like that. So in terms of the risk of getting it is very low. All these sectoral permits are granted eventually, but it's important to start focus and not to continue working very hard in getting all these permits. And as I was saying, we have the view that we will be allowed to break ground by the end of Q1 next year.
Well, it sounds like the government's strategic vision for copper and this kind of green transition moment that we're in, it seems to be aligning with practical permitting outcomes, and that's really sort of comforting to hear. I mean, Hayden, I'm going to come to you. What we heard was that there's a established process. If you go about it the right way, you can move through the phases relatively quickly. So that's good news from governmental permitting and regulatory environment. Markets. How do you think the market should see this, and what does it do for your business? And what should your shareholders be thinking?
Well, we discussed this internally because the market will probably shrug. I would expect the market to shrug and say, yeah, whatever, we're expecting this to happen. But given the history in the mining space of junior companies being delayed, in some cases by 2 decades, by permitting issues, it should be one of the most significant de-risking milestones that we've achieved as a company. So look, I think it's a huge milestone for us. We see the value of it internally, and I congratulate JA, Claudio Nilo, and Felix Del Pozo, our team, that were the architects of the strategy and executed the strategy really well. They've done a great job, and I think our Chilean team are very proud of the company that they're building. I think it should be a huge milestone. I'm not sure that the market will see it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. You make a point. Some projects being delayed by a couple of decades. That's no stretch, no exaggeration. Perhaps we should come on and talk about that with a couple of other guys. But it's nice to see this moving forward at pace. You've got the money to get on with it next year. And the market seems to be rewarding you with your new high grade project as well. Life is good, or are we quietly optimistic, cautiously optimistic?
I think, JA, correct me if I'm wrong, we would say we've been cautiously optimistic for quite a while, and now that optimism's been rewarded. And in terms of exploration, we're excited about that. We recognise that the next phase of development, there's a lot of work to be done, and I think a big proportion of that responsibility falls on JA and his team for the next round of permitting.
There you go, JA. Over to you. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. Great news, and stay in touch. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Matt.